Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada for Reason to Resist on July 18th, 2025. This week, proving that some things never change, Israel bombed Syria again. Take a look at this latest bombardment.
قصف جديد يا شباب قصف جديد ما بنهيئة الأركان خالص قصف جديد يا شباب قصف خذونا بسرعة 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 بسرعة.
What you saw in that video was apparently Israel's destruction of Syria's Ministry of Defense in Damascus. The attack, as you saw, occurred in broad daylight and reportedly killed at least 3 people. Israel's strikes were not limited to the Syrian Ministry of Defense. According to multiple reports, Israel also struck or attempted to strike the presidential palace in Damascus and did strike dozens of other sites in southern Syria. The pretext for Israel's latest bombing of Syria is the protection of Syria's Druze minority. The Druze are concentrated in the southern province of Sweida, where they constitute a majority. Sweida lies south of Damascus on the Syrian border with Jordan and the edge of the Golan Heights, occupied by Israel illegally since 1967. This week, fighting broke out in Sweida between Syrian government forces, now commanded by the supposedly reformed terrorist Mohammed al-Jolani, and members of the Druze minority. The Syrian forces are said to have intervened after clashes between the Druze and members of Bedouin tribes. Armed Druze who live in the area occupied by Israel apparently entered Sweida province from the Golan to protect the Druze in Sweida province. At least 516 civilians and fighters were killed in the clashes, according to the UK-based monitor, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The monitor said at least 86 civilians were killed by government forces and their allies, and that 3 Bedouin civilians were killed by Druze fighters on Thursday. An Israeli military spokesperson said the Israeli strikes were a message to Syria's president regarding the events in Sweida. In attempting to justify the Israeli strikes on Syria, the war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu, referred to the Druze as his brothers. Finally, and in late-breaking news, the Netanyahu regime announced this morning that it would allow Syrian government forces to deploy in parts of Sweida for the purpose of maintaining order there. Of course, Israel has no right to dictate whether Syria's government can deploy its forces in any part of the sovereign territory of Syria, but lacking the right to demand something never stopped Israel from demanding it. So now here to break all of this down with us is the intrepid geopolitical analyst and frontline journalist, Laith Marouf. Always a pleasure to have you, Laith. Laith, by the way, is the executive director of Free Palestine TV, in addition to being a broadcasting law expert. And we'll talk a little bit later about the most recent coverage of Free Palestine TV, but I commend it to you. It's doing outstanding reporting from the fronts of these wars in the region. Thank you for joining us again, Laith.
Great to be with you, Dimitri.
So, Laith, before we get into the reasons behind Israel's attacks, what do we know about the current situation on the ground in Sweida province? Is fighting still going on there? And if so, who is fighting whom, and what caused this fighting to break out?
Yeah, the fighting has continued. It's right now happening as we're speaking. The HTS Wahhabi death squads have once again rebranded. They're claiming to be Arab tribal forces from the south of Syria. Just as usual, these are chameleon contras, as I'd like to call them. And as we saw, al-Jolani himself switched colors at least 3 times since he was the second in command of ISIS. So most of the Western media and the Zionist media is talking about Arab tribes from Sweida that feel oppressed by the Druze are now 50,000 of them suddenly are carrying arms and trying to attack Sweida city. So this is all propaganda. The truth is, it's the same HTS, just took off their, Velcro sticky on their shoulders that defines them as such, and they're continuing their attacks on the province. In terms of the massacres that these Wahhabi death squads are committing in Sweida, there was the largest massacre, which was the attack on the National Hospital in Sweida city, where the Wahhabi death squads entered the hospital and killed every doctor, every nurse, and every patient. So over 400 people in that one massacre alone, all civilians, killed at the hands of the Wahhabi death squads. And that was one of the major triggers of this fight back. Okay, so there was no attacks on Bedouin Arabs in Sweida by the population of Sweida or the Druze population of Sweida. That's all just manufactured, excuses. And the whole purpose of what we see, for those who don't understand the geography and history of Syria, is that historically, any political change in Syria, revolutions, fight backs, what have you, start from the three extremes of the territory, which are the northeast, there is Zor, and the area between the two rivers, the Euphrates and Tigris, the extreme south in Sweida, and the extreme west on the coast. Although the vast majority of the population lives between Aleppo and Damascus, in the heart, that is not where revolutionary fever starts in the country. There's thinkers come out of the main civil areas like the big cities, but revolutionary leaders come from the edges of control. So historically, as I said, for instance, my great uncle, Mohammed al-Arfi, who was the Mufti of Deir ez-Zor and Al Jazeera area, was one of the main leaders of the Syrian revolution against French occupation, along with Amir Sultan al-Atrash, heading the Druze population of Sweida, and the leaders of the Alawite sect in the coast. This is how the Syrian revolution was started against French occupation. This is how every other revolution before it against Ottoman rule and others also started. So the Americans managed in the first 10 plus years of the war on Syria to, on the one hand, destroy the Arab Sunni tribes of Deir ez-Zor and destroy their cities like Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor itself, and loot their resources, the oil, the gas, the flour, the wheat, the cotton, and hand it over to the Kurdish traders and sell it to the Israelis for free, basically. And then we saw the second stage after the collapse of the Assad government in Damascus is to break the will and the spirit of the Alawi people in the coast. And that happened and is still continuing, the mass rapes, mass killings, mass expulsions of those populations. And now finally, what was left is the Druze base of patriotic feelings in al-Sweida. And the intention was to break the will of those people and their connection to their history of resistance to colonialism, Zionism, and imperialism. And what happened is that the Wahhabi death squads governed by al-Jolani were unable to deliver on this goal. The people of Sweida fought back and defeated the invading Wahhabi death squads. So that was the plan that Jolani was supposed to deliver on after his meeting with the Israelis in Azerbaijan. And since he wasn't able to deliver on it, it exposed the fact that al-Jolani cannot govern Syria, not the way that the West wants it. Therefore, it's clear that the days are numbered of al-Jolani's governance. And the successful resistance of Sweida will inspire other parts of the country to also join in this rebellion. Therefore, the Zionist attacks on Damascus and other parts of the country that day were designed as a plan B backup in the situation that al-Jolani cannot govern Syria and some revolution reaches Damascus, that there will be no institutions of state governance left for a patriot to take control. And it will be impossible to govern the country if you destroy all its ministries and all its essentials to governing a state. And this is what the Israelis are doing right now.
So, as I mentioned in the introduction, this is fascinating and extraordinarily depraved what you're describing, and frankly, entirely believable given we're talking about a state that is carrying out genocide and every monstrosity known to humanity as we speak. But there was this report, and I think I even saw images which purported to show Druze in areas in the occupied Golan passing through a fence and entering Sweida province to go help their brothers. What do you make of those reports? Did the Israelis actually allow Druze to go join with their brothers in Sweida province from the occupied Golan?
Well, right now, we have to be very clear here that the Druze of the Golan Heights are Syrian citizens that have refused since 1967 to be nationalized as Israelis, carry the Syrian national flag, and fought up until the last minute against the Zionists, even before the fall of Damascus, right? And the Zionists themselves have moved and the border and have occupied all this new territory in Syria, in the south of Syria. And there's been many Zionist colonists crossing this fence back and forth and taking pictures of themselves in villages in the south of Syria. So what we saw is the Druze of the Golan Heights that are Syrian patriots fight their way through the fence to cross, to reach Sweida, and to reach Jeramana, which is the neighborhood south of Damascus that is mainly Druze, and also mainly Druze from the Golan Heights as refugees from 1967. And we, part of that group that crossed was the leaders of the religious institutions of Druze inside the Golan Heights. And when they reached Sweida, they stood beside the leaders of the Druze religious institutions in Sweida, and both of them denounced Israel, denounced Zionism as the main ill that harms Syria, refused any help from the Zionists, and also refused to ally themselves with the Wahhabi death squads in Damascus. So the statements coming from the leadership of the Druze religious institutions, both in the Golan Heights and inside Sweida, are the most patriotic statements that we can ever imagine coming out of them.
Mm-hmm. And what do you make of, well, first of all, could you tell us what was the reaction of al-Jolani to the destruction of the Syrian Ministry of Defense? And apparently, please tell me if this is inaccurate, apparently they also, as I mentioned, struck the presidential palace, the Israelis. What was al-Jolani's reaction to this, and what do you make of his reaction?
So we have to note here that with the fall of the Assad government, the Wahhabi death squads and the Wahhabi media behind them and the Saudi media, Qatari media, and so forth, lost the fig leaf that was covering their privates, okay? Their diseased privates, that they have been claiming for a decade that Syria and the government of Bashar al-Assad is protecting Israel, that the resistance axis is killing Sunnis, all right? And that all the ills of Syria and the whole region is because of the axis of resistance. Well, now there is no Bashar al-Assad, there is no axis of resistance inside Syria, and the door is open for anybody to go and fight in Palestine if they want to. They claim that Assad was protecting Israel. Well, today we see them sending 50,000 fighters to kill people in Sweida, just a few kilometers away from the border of Palestine, right? Mm-hmm. So now the Wahhabis and liberals and the whole collaborators with the empire in the region have been exposed badly. So the attacks of the Zionists on the Ministry of Defense and on parts of the presidential palace were designed, on the one hand, to give some credibility to Jolani, to make him look like he is fighting Israel or that Israel is working against him. On the other, as I said, is to destroy institutions within the state of Syria that could allow somebody to govern in the case of al-Jolani collapse. The other thing that we need to note here is that the video that you showed in the beginning is of the Umayyad Square, and around the Umayyad Square is the general command of the Syrian military, the National Archive and the National Library, the National Television and Broadcasting Association, and other museums and so forth, right? And so the attack on this area is an attack on not only the Ministry of Defense and or the General Command of the military, it's an attack on the glue that keeps together Syria as an identity. If the archive and the library, National Library, are burnt down, what's going to be left? Okay, how was this Ministry of Defense and the General Command, how were they empty before those attacks that we just saw? If there was no coordination between the al-Jolani and Netanyahu around this, if the Ministry of Defense and the General Command headquarters were attacked in the middle of the day as they were, and they're supposed to be full of bureaucrats and generals and so forth, and you tell me there's only 3 dead, that means the buildings were empty and somebody that was walking on the street that died. It wasn't somebody inside those buildings. That's another proof of the collaboration and coordination between the actions of the Zionists and the Wahhabis inside Syria.
Yeah, I was very surprised, having seen, the level of destruction in broad daylight on a weekday. I was very surprised to see that the death count was only 3 persons. I mean, wow. So I certainly believe that lends credence to your interpretation of the events, Laith. Let's talk briefly about, we don't have to be brief about it. Please take as much time as you want, but I want to talk about what's going on in Lebanon and how the events in Syria affect the Lebanese resistance. There have been reports, I've seen a number of reports over the last several weeks, that the Israelis were basically threatening the Lebanese government that if they did not disarm Hezbollah, the armed wing of Hezbollah, then they were going to, unleash hell in the south of Lebanon, and Syrian forces, really, they're not Syrian. They're, as you put it, Wahhabi death squads, would squeeze the Lebanese resistance from the border areas between Syria and Lebanon, and effectively, the sovereignty of Lebanon, to the extent that it continues to exist at all, would be destroyed, and Lebanon would just become, some kind of an appendage of a Jolani-led Syria. I don't know whether there's any truth to these reports or not, but these developments, assuming that there was some kind of a plan in place by the Israelis and their Western backers to squeeze Lebanon from the south and from the east using the Wahhabi death squads, these developments involving the Druze seem to have thrown a bit of a spanner in that plan, because the Jolani is having serious problems in Sweida province, not likely to want to redirect his forces to some kind of a quagmire in Lebanon. What do you think? First of all, is there truth to these reports that the Israelis were making these threats to the Lebanese government? And I should mention that there have been reports of a limited incursion of Israeli ground forces into the south of Lebanon, but it's not at all clear that there has been any kind of a meaningful incursion. Tell us what's going on in Lebanon, and particularly in the border areas.
Yeah, so number one, actual threats to have al-Jolani and his death squads crossing into Syria and taking it over came out of the mouth of Emperor Trump's envoy to the region, Barak, who basically said that al-Jolani could invade al-Biqa' Valley and Tarablos city in the north, Tripoli. So yes, these threats are coming every day. But as you also noted, reality has shown us that it's impossible for him to do this, especially as al-Sweida, which is a remote area, blockaded from all sides by American occupation forces in Iraq and in Jordan on all sides, and the other side with these Wahhabi death squads invading it. And they're unable to have deliver on a military victory on behalf of the Zionists and the empire. Okay, we saw also a kind of a preview to a possibility of this Wahhabi invasion of Lebanon just weeks after the fall of Assad's government, when HTS invaded villages on the border in the north, in the Biqa' Valley, right on the border with Syria in the north, and the Lebanese military just evaporated. Okay, and the tribes and the clans of that area picked up weapons and fought back HTS. And HTS was coming with their red bandanas, meaning their elite force. And the local clans of northern Lebanon in that area managed to defeat the elite forces of HTS, push them back, and enter Syria and liberate at least 3 villages inside Syrian territory from HTS. And at that point, the Israeli military air force came and started hitting positions of the Lebanese tribes on the border to allow the HTS to escape. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the Lebanese military showed up and cut the border to not allow the Lebanese tribes to liberate their brothers and sisters inside Syria. You see? So, and at that point, the locals decided not to confront the Lebanese military, okay, that was collaborating literally with the Zionists and the HTS. So we had a preview. And at that moment, Lebanon was weaker than today. Hezbollah was weaker than today. At that moment was the moment after the assassinations. You had all the depressive moment of collapse of Damascus. There was all the high that the Zionists and the Wahhabis were on, and they couldn't achieve anything. Okay, so it is an impossibility for them to deliver on this. That doesn't mean that they will not try. Okay. And as we see, the Zionists are crazy enough to drag the whole world into a world war, even if they're going to lose it. But they're that loony. Okay. And what's the effects of what's happening in Syria is already being seen in Lebanon. Thousands of Druze carried arms over the last week, and thousands of them attempted to cross into Syria. There was confrontations with the Lebanese military, actually, by Druze fighters against them to try to go and defend their brothers and sisters in Sweida. And right now, we're also seeing videos of Lebanese mercenaries, specifically from Tarablos city, fighting on behalf of HTS in Sweida. So we can see already a spillage from Lebanon into Syria, and there could be a spillage backwards. Okay, that's not something not to expect. And I think all that had happened to the minorities in Syria over the last 6 months has only radicalized many, many people in Lebanon, whether Christian, Druze, Shia, Alawi, all of them are increasing in buying weapons and going to training camps. And even those who support the Wahhabi death squads, let's say, are also in that mood of, okay, now the possibility is there's no borders, everything's open, let's cross, let's fight here, let's fight there. That's the reality. And your other part of your question was about Zionist invasion in South Lebanon. It happened yesterday that a small platoon of Israeli soldiers crossed into the village of Mais el-Jabal, which we went together to multiple times, me and you, and they just blew up two excavators that were being used by the villagers to remove the rubble of their homes. This comes also after 3 days of multiple attacks on villages in the south of Lebanon. Yesterday, there was an attack in the Naqoura area, Abriha village. Naqoura is right on the sea and right on the border with Palestine, where the Israelis shelled a home, killing a mother and a father, and the little girl survived. I think she's like 9 or something. And she called the emergency, and for her, it became a very famous call that was circulated on all the media there. It's almost like Hind Rajab, how she was like left alone. So the crimes of the Zionists continue. There's talk about, the Zionists are claiming that they have instituted a no-build zone in all of the south of Lebanon, and that they will be attacking anybody that tries to rebuild any of the villages in the south. So this is going to only, in most probably, accelerate the possibility of return to armed confrontation between the Zionists and the Lebanese resistance. Because if it's now, 200 something villages are not allowed to be rebuilt back, this is now going to mean that the locals of those villages will have no choice but to resist. And Hezbollah will attempt to absorb that will to resist and deliver on it. Otherwise, Hezbollah will be losing ground within those communities if it does not deliver on those aspirations.
Mm-hmm. And, the Secretary General of Hezbollah said repeatedly that Hezbollah will not disarm. He seems to have been quite consistent in that position. But at the same time, as far as I can tell, there has been no real resistance to Israel's attacks on Lebanon. It appears almost daily attacks, sometimes multiple times a day. And this has been going on now since when did this so-called ceasefire come into effect, Laith? Was it in November of last year, something like that? So
end of December, yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I've asked you this question before. Every time you come on, why hasn't Hezbollah responded in any way, shape, or form to the constant attacks from Israel?
Well, there's two reasons, I would say. One is that they need to rebuild all their structures. And here I'm talking about the human, element. Okay, so anyone that was known to be in any officer or whatever position that is exposed have to be retired, and you have to get in now people that are unknown into those positions because of the amount of data and information that the Zionists had gathered over 15 years before this war. So that's number one. So that's different than the need to rearm. Okay, so I think the rearming is finished. The restructuring is finished, and right now what we know is there will be a war, whether we like it or not, again on Lebanon. The question is, of course, what shape it will take. It's going to be different than the wars before. Every war is different, but this time the conditions are already different. You have the front on the east and the north with Syria that could be active at the same time, and of course that's front in the south. And given that the frontline villages are destroyed, and much of the capabilities that were there are non-existent in the southern villages, then we should be expecting a totally different kind of warfare. And I'm not privy to it. You're not privy to it. We don't know what's their plans, but for sure, they will not be instigating a attack, okay, that will lead to uncalculated outcomes. What they can prepare for is the shape of defense they can have. That's the only thing that they can guarantee in a scenario, the outcomes of it, right? They can prepare every possibility of attack against them and prepare the defense to it to defeat the enemy. Taking the war as a war of offensive war against the Zionists is something that you cannot calculate the outcomes of. And in this situation, they definitely should not be taking any adventurous moves.
Yeah, one thing that's really stood out for me, Laith, is that despite the constant aerial attacks on Lebanon and the blows that the Islamic resistance sustained during its year-long fight with the genocidal entity, they haven't really attempted any large-scale ground incursion. I mean, what you just described sounds like a photo op, because they could have destroyed those 2 excavators, presumably from the air. They didn't need to send a platoon in for a few hours for this photo op. If the Israelis believed that Hezbollah was a spent force, could no longer put up strong resistance, I can't imagine they wouldn't have entered South Lebanon en masse all the way up to the Litani River and occupied it. The fact they've refrained from doing that, would you agree that that suggests that they understand that Hezbollah remains a very potent enemy, at least on its own territory?
Definitely, they know that, and look, otherwise they would have occupied those territories that they destroyed, right? But the thing is that if Israel actually occupies these territories, what will happen is, given that the villages are already destroyed, right, is all that Hezbollah needs to do is carpet bomb those villages that are already destroyed if the Israelis enter them, and so it's a losing situation for the Israelis. There is no defensive positions that they have inside Lebanese territory. They have their bunkers, 3 levels under the ground in the front lines that of occupied Palestine. But the minute they go out of that, they're going to be easy targets, because there's nothing left to hide under even, okay? Right. So it's an impossibility for the Israelis to attack. And this is why they need the Wahhabi death squads to do this work of trying to invade Lebanon from the east or the north. But as I explained before, it's clear that Wahhabi death squads can do it. It doesn't mean that they will not follow the orders of their master if it comes, even if it means they die all. They've sold their soul to the devil. They'll do anything that the devil requests. But the Zionists cannot do this. And I want to even, go back a little bit to Sweida, because there's a lot of talk about, the Israelis want to occupy all of the south of Syria to Sweida to create this Abraham corridor or whatever it is to Iraq. That the territory of South Syria between the Golan and Sweida is 2/3 the size of occupied Palestine. What military force does Israel have to occupy South Syria? Its military is demoralized, fatigued. All their seasoned soldiers have been either killed or maimed. They're depending on the hilltop colonists from the West Bank with these fascist groups to fight the fight right now in Gaza. And they're dying in bigger numbers than they were even a year and a half ago inside Gaza. So it is all delusion to talk about Israel occupying South Syria and or attempting to occupy Lebanon. That's not going to happen. What can happen is those Wahhabi death squads, more of them being imported from the rest of the countries that the United States controls and be thrown on the border and, dispensed like cannon fodder, horde after horde. That's possible. But otherwise, there's no way to occupy neither Lebanon nor South Syria for the Israelis.
You mentioned earlier that Lebanese Druze had crossed into Syria to defend their brothers, armed Lebanese Druze. Approximately how many Druze are there in Lebanon? And in general, what is their attitude towards Israel and its attacks on Lebanon?
I'm not sure about the Druze population in Lebanon.
Are we talking hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands? Did you have any?
Something like 300,000.
Right.
Okay, so around, let's say, 8% of the population of Lebanon. Historically, the Druze of Lebanon belong to two parties, both of them pro-Palestinian, pro-resistance, including the largest party, which is the Socialist Party, led by the Jumblat family. Even with their little bit, sometimes flip-floppy, in the end, they're anti-Zionist. And that is true of the whole population. This is not an issue of them just belonging to these parties. And so how many of them could be active? They even their religious leaders in Lebanon of the Druze sect are much, much closer to the religious leaders of the Druze in Syria than, let's say, the Palestinian Druze leadership that has accepted Israeli citizenship and serves in the Israeli military. So I don't think it's possible to infiltrate the Druze population in Lebanon because of how tribal they are, and the fact that even those two parties that we talk about are basically led by families that for 100 years, the same leaders of the family. So it's very tribal. It's hard to break that. And because of the historical record that is accumulative within the Lebanese Druze population, you'd have to basically erase all history and cut continuity of time to suddenly get them to be collaborators, and that's not an easy job. Okay.
Let's talk now about the West Bank. I mean, in all the areas where there's extreme violence happening over the past several months, probably the West Bank has gotten the least attention. The one report that I saw in the so-called mainstream Western media, and even this coverage was muted, relating to the West Bank, was that a Palestinian American was beaten to death by these terrorist settlers. And I haven't checked recently, but the only statement I saw from the Trump administration was that they were aware of the death of this American citizen. But I've seen no indication that the Trump administration is going to try to hold anybody accountable for this. Could you talk to us about that incident, what happened, what the response of the U.S. government has been, and more broadly about what your courageous journalists on the ground in the West Bank, Free Palestine TV's journalists, have reported in recent days?
Well, this young man was visiting his extended family on vacation, and he was lynched, literally, by these hilltop colonists. And another man, this was in Tulkarem, I believe, and another young man also that was around was shot by those same colonists for trying to save him. And so they beat him to death, and there's no other word that can be used but lynching, right? And this is not the first time that unarmed civilians have been lynched by these colonists in the West Bank. It's becoming almost a norm. Every couple of weeks, there's another case like that. This is only made the news in the West because he's a dual citizen, the young man that was lynched. The destruction is widespread. I think right now, 80% of Jenin refugee camp and Tulkarem refugee camp have been leveled to the ground by the Israelis. The villages in the Jordan Valley have been completely ethnically cleansed. There's no more Palestinians left in the Jordan River Valley. We're talking about at least 12 villages depopulated. Okay. In Al Khalil, or what is called Hebron in English, where the Ibrahimi Mosque, where Prophet Abraham and his wife are buried, it has now been banned for Muslims to enter the mosque. And the Waqf, which is the religious endowment authorities, have been disbanded in Al Khalil. And the whole control of the Ibrahimi Mosque has been transferred to the colony council, the Zionist colony that's inside Hebron, that is occupying the heart of the city and stole all those homes and businesses from the local people of Hebron. They are right now in charge of the religious site. So this is the first time that this happens since World War I, that the Muslim authorities are, stripped away of their right to control this endowment lands and religious site. So this is, causing a lot of resentment, especially from the Palestinians, to not towards the Zionists, because everybody knows they're the devil. The resentment now is being directed towards the Palestinian Authority collaborationist class and the Muslim countries and Arab countries that call themselves Muslims, like Saudi Arabia and so on, who haven't opened their mouth about the usurpation of the Ibrahimi Mosque and its desecration and the change in the status quo that is signed on to all the treaties since World War I until now. And this is, the only reason we don't feel what's happening in the West Bank, how tremendous these changes are, is because of the out-and-out mass genocide that's happening in Gaza, that's making the crimes that are in the West Bank look like they are nothing. But the crimes that are being committed currently in the West Bank are worse than any period since World War I. The mass destruction of homes is more than any period since World War I in the West Bank. The depopulation of whole sectors and areas, there is more internally displaced right now in the West Bank than there was in 1967. Okay? So these are extreme realities in the West Bank, and they only don't look this extreme because of the contrast to the genocide broadcasted from Gaza.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen much in the way of reports in the past several months on resistance Telegram channels of acts of armed resistance by groups, for example, the Tulkarm brigades in the occupied West Bank. Is there any meaningful level of armed resistance in the West Bank still ongoing?
There is. We don't hear about it that much. You're right. On the one hand, the Palestinian Authority has killed at least 100 Palestinian people that were resisting at that moment or were accused of resistance by the Israelis. So, and hundreds of people have been kidnapped, if not thousands of people kidnapped from the West Bank and are languishing in torture and prisons that the PA and the Israelis control. We saw, by the way, earlier in the week, the Palestine bureau chief of Al Mayadeen television kidnapped by the Israelis from his home and was sent to Ofer prison, where he was tortured. This man is one of the most famous journalists in the West Bank, and he's also Christian Palestinian. So there was a response from the churches there about his detainment, and he came out and talked about just yesterday when they released him. He talked about all the torture that he saw in the Ofer prison. In general, I would say right now the resistance in the West Bank is either trying to hide because much of the leadership has been killed and or detained by the Israelis or the PA. And we see the outright collaboration now of the PA out in the open. They don't care about anyone talking. So, we have to presume that there's strains on the resistance in the West Bank, and that they have to figure out how to design their activities in a way that is not going to lead them to the same results that we saw.
Let's switch to the subject of Iran. I am struck by the fact, when the Israelis pled for this ceasefire, publicly they were saying that they wanted this to become what they described as the Lebanon model, which they clearly meant that they would retain the right to continue to strike Iran at will, but Iran would be obliged to refrain from retaliation. And I said at the time that I think that the Iranians would accept nothing less than the Yemeni model, which is that, maybe we'll stop attacking Americans, but we're going to continue to attack the Zionist entity. In any case, whatever Israel's intentions may have been, there's no evidence whatsoever of any kind of attack, whether overt or covert, by the genocidal entity on the Islamic Republic since the ceasefire, which I think has now been 3 weeks, maybe more, which is a rather notable exercise of restraint by the standards of Israel. So at the same time, it's really hard to believe, Laith, that they're not going to attack Iran again somehow, some way. The way I put it is they seem to be trapped between hubris and fear right now. And I'm curious what you make of all of this, and what are your expectations in terms of Israel's aggression towards the Islamic Republic? And I'm also curious to know how you think the Islamic Republic is using this time. I mean, there have been a lot of reports about China and Russia providing, principally China, air defense systems and or J-10 fighter jets. Personally, I have skepticism about that because of some statements that were made by China's ambassador to Israel. In an interview with Israel Hayom, he categorically denied that there were any air defense systems being provided by the People's Republic of China to the Islamic Republic. On the question of the J-10 fighters, he was more equivocal. He said, I'm expressing my personal opinion. I don't think Israel has anything to worry about, but we'll have to see what, the Chinese Defense Ministry says, something like that. So sorry for the, multi-part question, but just to summarize, what do you think Israel's plan is? Does it even have a plan? And secondly, what do you think the Chinese and the Russians are doing to help Iran to prepare for the next aggression?
When you said that the Israelis wanted the Lebanese model, I mean, that's their model, not only in Lebanon, and not only in that they wish for and work for, even in media. Okay, so an Israeli is supposed to be able to call you every name possible, and you cannot say anything bad at them. You remember how it works in the media. The minute you say something bad at them, you're the end of humanity. But they can dream. I mean, they see themselves that they have this power inside Canada and the US, where Canadian citizens can be destroyed for even saying something that is not obscene on media that is critical of the Zionists. And they believe that they can do that anywhere. But as we saw in the war on Iran, that 12-day war, is that the United States, as the sponsor of the Zionist colony, went as far as it can with this war against Iran below the nuclear threshold. And the United States used everything it has below that nuclear threshold to try to defeat the Iranians on the behalf of the Zionists, and they couldn't. Therefore, the US is in retreat. Therefore, we see the Zionists are also in retreat. Will they use nuclear weapons against Iran? Maybe, but they cannot. If they attack anything below the nuclear threshold, as Israel, again, they will lose the war again. So it is not going to happen. There's very much bigger possibilities of triggering terrorist attacks on Iran through Wahhabi despots from Afghanistan, from Balochistan in Pakistan, from Iraq, from Azerbaijan, from Turkey. Those are all possibilities. And it's much more realistic that that happens. The other thing that you just mentioned about the air defenses, I know, the Zionist propaganda has been successful, I think, in making a lot of people believe that somehow the Israeli Air Force had any freedom of action in Iranian airspace. But this is untrue. It's now been, as you said, a month since the war ended almost, and we don't have one video of any Israeli jets over Iranian airspace. And don't tell me that Iranian authorities are so amazing in their censorship that they they caught every video possible. I mean, the Zionists had agents on the ground flying drones. Those same agents would have filmed an Israeli jet, F-15, F-16, F-18, F-35 over Iranian airspace for the propaganda value of it. And would have released it. So what is clear is that the Israeli Air Force was unable to enter Iranian airspace, had to fire always from over Iraqi airspace or Azerbaijani airspace, or even over the Caspian Sea, not over Iranian territory in the Caspian Sea. So long-range missiles fired from those jets and or cruise missiles and what have you fired from other locations. What does this tell us? That tells us that Iran's air defenses are actually doing their work. Okay, there's no way you can, as we saw with Israel's own air defense, there's no way you can shoot down every rocket that comes at you. But there is no way for Israeli Air Force to cross into Iran's airspace, because Iranian air defense systems are that good that they will shoot down anything that enters the country. I don't think Iran will ask anything of Russia specifically in that terms, because Iran paid for S-400s and Russia took the money and refused to deliver the S-400s, and Iran sued Russia, if people don't remember this, to retrieve its money. Okay, so there's no way Iran will depend on Russia for anything that could be breaking the balance of power between Israel and Iran. Russia will not allow Iran to be more powerful than Israel, or to have the ability to defend itself completely against Israeli attack. When we talk about China, there's more possibilities there, because of China's history of refusing to acknowledge the existence of the Zionist colony until 1992, when Arafat signed the Oslo agreement. Because the Chinese people are 100% pro-Palestinian, because there's no Jewish population in China. Okay? Those are reasons why possibly China may help. But again, I don't know if the Iranians would want to put China in that position, okay, and or to put themselves on, for the first time, to test China's credibility on a war situation, not on an economy situation. So I don't think Iran wants to put China in that situation or put itself in that situation. There's much more possibility that China is exchanging technology with Iran. And there's even a bigger, and this is where everybody should note, there's a much, much, much bigger possibility that it is North Korea, the Korean Democratic Republic of Korea, that is right now invested in helping Iran develop either more its missile system, its air defense systems, and or possibly its nuclear weapons systems. That is somebody we can stand and trust as people from the region here, and anybody from the south that is resisting. We all know that there's nobody more trustworthy than the regime, the government of Korea, North Korea.
And lastly, Laith, I just can't resist asking you this because I'm
Although it's the reason to resist, you know.
I'm not going to resist this particular temptation. I really want to hear from you, and I'd like our audience to hear from you on this Epstein scandal that's brewing in the United States. I think, there's so much we could talk about here, and we could go on for hours, but I want to focus on one thing. And that is, but if you don't want to limit your commentary to this one thing, please, I invite you to offer your views about what's going on in that regard. And the thing that I want to focus on is the fact that these hugely influential figures from the MAGA movement, particularly Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, have turned on Donald Trump in a big way. I mean, I had never watched, I've said this publicly in the last couple of days, until, this brainless, hapless, hopeless Attorney General Pam Bondi said she wasn't going to release the Epstein files. I had never watched a video of Candace Owens. I hadn't even watched 1 minute of Candace Owens, but I heard that she was doing some extraordinarily damaging reporting on the Epstein scandal. So I started watching the last few nights, and indeed, the revelations are coming thick and fast. And whatever you may think about her other positions on other issues, it seems very clear that she's sincerely enraged by the Donald's refusal to disclose these files. She keeps saying over and over again, this is about, and it's true, it's about the molestation of children and the complicity of powerful people in the molestation of children. And she's just got an ironclad determination to, I think, expose everybody in this regard. And Tucker Carlson seems to be pretty much in the same place. He gave this speech at this huge conservative convention recently, in which he just went off on Israel. And he was getting applause. He was getting, large amounts of applause in what he was saying. So, we've seen polls which show that the Democratic Party supporters, Israel's lost them. There's like only 12% of them now are saying they're more sympathetic with Israel than with Palestinians. Something like 60+% say they're more sympathetic with Palestinians. What do you make of this, these influencers from the MAGA movement turning on Donald Trump? What do you think this portends for the future of America and Israeli relations? But also more broadly, what do you make of this whole scandal?
Well, I think the positions of both Candace Owen and Tucker Carlson show actually that they are principled. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that I agree with their positions. But these are actually people that have an opinion, that have a vision, that have a principle, whether I agree with that principle or not, and they stand by it. And they are loud in their voice when they're doing so. This is, having Candace Owen and Tucker Carlson take the lead on this and be so clear in their principled position on it is not only to their credit, but it's also a condemnation of the left or the leftovers in the West. I know I'm taking it somewhere maybe you didn't think that I will go there. But look at the options that we have right now with this Corbyn and whatever her name is, the South Asian MP that just split from the Labour Party in the UK. They are soft-spoken. And
sorry,
they want to leave it up.
Just sorry to interrupt. You're referring to Zahra Sultana, who left.
Exactly. Right. Zahra Sultana.
Right.
And Corbyn. Mm-hmm. I mean, their problem is that they're not bulldogs. They're chihuahuas. Right? I watched that debate on the prescription of Palestine action. I watched just before it, there was a debate on the NHS. And then I saw that Nigerian leader of the Conservative Party in the UK. And when I watched her perform, although I disagree with everything that she says, when I watched her perform, I'm like, wow, this is the most bulldog leader of the Conservative parties I've seen since Thatcher. Okay? And she made the Minister of Health of the Labour Party cry live inside the house. And you want to have Corbyn and Sultana lead a party where they're like whispering. When they were speaking to the Defense of Palestine Action, they were whispering, and the room is empty. There was nobody to heckle them even. And they couldn't raise their voice. This is a problem also, and I love Yves Engler. I watched his interview with you. Remember, by the way, Dimitri, let's tell our audience here. Remember when I asked you, how about us, we run in the Canadian elections?
You did indeed. Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Whether it's disruptive or we would win. Definitely me and you would be bulldogs.
That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
We always have.
I love Yves. He's a great writer. He's a great thinker. But, when they say he is the Noam Chomsky of Canada, they're right. Because, unfortunately, he's not a bulldog. Right? And
well,
this moment,
I just want to say, I want to. You, of course, have your opinion. I actually do view Yves as a bulldog because I've been with him many times when he gets in the face of politicians, and he's been arrested. He was thrown in jail a few months ago for condemning this just psycho.
Yes, but I mean a bulldog in how you speak to the people. How do you speak to the people? Do not want any more soft spoken. They need right now leaders, revolutionaries that show them power, that they're willing to do this. So let's have that. Where is that? Where is the Candace Owen and or the Tucker Carlson of supposed left in the West? None. Okay, so and to go back to the beginnings here of talking about Epstein, of course, the Mossad has all these, revealing tapes of all these politicians in the West, including Mr. Trump, who owned beauty pageant. What do you call it? Competition? What is it?
Miss Universe, I believe it was.
Exactly, Miss Universe. Basically, it was a prostitution ring that he would, take around the world.
And he told New York Magazine in 2002 that Epstein was a terrific guy and one of his best friends on God's green earth. And this was the period when he was molesting children.
Yes, and Melania Trump, of course, was one of those women that was brought to an Epstein party to meet Trump, and here she is. There's not, it's not rocket science what's happening, and of course, all the kings and queens of the Gulf and other places, and the dictators in Africa and Latin America and Europe, all of them have also been in those tapes. This is why they are in power, anyways. So it's not an issue of only Trump and what's his name. Clinton or other American leaders that were also in this situation. The world is run by this filth, like Epstein. He's not an outlier. Epstein is the embodiment of how the system is run. This capitalist global system.
I couldn't agree more, and I hope that the combination of this genocide and this Epstein scandal have awoken our comrades around the world to just how depraved the ruling elite is. My God, just speechless. In any event, comrade, always a pleasure to speak with you. And please stay safe. It seems like things are getting more and more dangerous by the day in Lebanon. And please keep us posted on developments. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. See you soon, inshallah.
And before you go, please just tell people where they can find your wonderful news outlet and how they can contribute.
Yes, freepalestine.video is our website. We're on YouTube, X at TV Free Palestine. We're on Instagram, free.palestine.tv. You can find all the socials on freepalestine.video. We are currently, by the way, finishing a documentary that we did in Iran. It should be out hopefully in the next few days. And we're continuing our reports from the field. please donate. This is the only way we can sustain our content production.
Okay, great. And we're signing off from Montreal and Beirut, Lebanon on July 18th, 2025. Peace out.